Kuryun, or longing, be it due to nature's wrath or man-made ordeal, is a very powerful emotion causing pain and suffering, which, as Buddha succinctly put, constitute the core of our existence and experience. Our pick of the day, 눈물젖은 두만강, or Tear-drenched Duman River, is one such soulful song that enables us to make sense of this labyrinth of irreparable loss, heart-wrenching human sufferings, and the healing power of poetry. Hi, this is Sanjay Sharma, and you have started enjoying our Reading Korea in Rhythm series, where I bring notable Korean compositions that not only enrich us with their literary or musical value, but also unpack some of the most intriguing accounts from Korea's past and present. So if you are into this fascinating world of Korean and East Asian affairs, as a student, a diplomat, journalist, or a business professional, this series is for you. I hope you love the episode. So let's get started with a glance over Duman River's location and significance before we enjoy this classic composition. Shall we? The Korean peninsula is connected with the mainland through an 880-mile border shared with China and about 11-mile border with Russia. And not quite, but almost in the middle of this border sits Mount Paektu, or Paektusan in Korean, and Changbaishan in Chinese. From there, the stream that flows in the western direction towards the Yellow Sea is this 490-mile long Amnok River, or Yalu River. And the one that flows in the eastern direction towards Russia between the southern border of Jilin province in China and the northern border of North Korean provinces like Hamgyeongbukdo and Ryanggang-do, and falls in the Sea of Japan, is known as Duman River. This 324-mile long river gets its name from the Mongolian word Tumen, meaning 10,000 or a myriad. Russians call it Tuman-naya, meaning foggy. That's true. It is super foggy, especially in the harsh winter of the northeast. Now, to ascertain the significance of Duman River, we need to pay attention to at least three elements that have directly or indirectly influenced the geostrategic equations in East Asia. They are, first, Paektusan and its people; second, competing regional interests; and the last, peninsula in pain. Let's unpack them one by one. Paektusan, sans doute, is the nucleus around which the story of Korea revolves. It is associated with this sacred and spiritual story of Tangun, the mythological founder and god king of Gojoseon, the first Korean kingdom around present-day Liaoning, Manchuria, and the northern part of the Korean peninsula, as mentioned in the 13th century memorabilia of the Three Kingdoms, known as Samguk-yusa. Samguk-yusa is a collection of folk tales, legends, and historical accounts related to several states and periods, but in particular the Three Kingdoms of Korea, namely Goguryeo, Baekje, and Shilla. What enhances this special status is the fact that Paektusan finds its rightful place in the Aegukga, or the national anthem of both North and South Korea. In the North Korean anthem, Paektusan appears as the 29th word, whereas in case of South Korean anthem, it is the second word. The talk of Paektusan is incomplete if I don't mention about Arirang, a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage, and the most popular Korean folk song with about 60 versions that became a resistance anthem against the Japanese rule between 1910 to 1945. In the standard version from Seoul, Paektusan is mentioned in the third stanza. Let me show you, though some of you may have heard it before. 아리랑 아리랑 아라리요 아리랑 고개로 넘어간다. And if I jump straight to the third stanza, it reads, 저기 저 산이 백두산이라지 동지서 딸에도 꽃만 핀다. Beautifully expressed. There, over there, that mountain is Paektusan, where even in the middle of winter days, flowers bloom. So you can see the reverence in the reference. But ever thought that a sacred mythology like this can also be a justification to legitimize a totalitarian regime? Well, this is precisely what the North Korean Kim dynasty has done, asserting its origin from Paektusan and the area around Pyongyang, the capital, where Tangun is believed to have lived as a real historical person, not mere legend. After Paektusan, let's talk about the people in the vicinity, namely Yeonbyeon Joseonjeok Jachiju or Yeonbyeon Korean Autonomous Prefecture in Jilin Province. In an earlier series of Reading Korean Rhythm on famous poet Yoon Dong-ju, I briefly mentioned about Jilin Province. History tells about economic hardships on the Korean peninsula that resulted in a huge mass migration to northeast China in the last phase of the 19th century. During Japanese rule, for political reasons, a sizable number migrated to Manchuria. This exodus continued later after the Republic of China was founded. In the post-Second World War phase, there were around 1.2 million ethnic Koreans in the region. Many of them took part in the Chinese Civil War supporting the communist camp. As a reward, they were officially recognized as minority and one of the 56 ethnicities in China and were given their own autonomous region in 1952. 3 years later, Yeonbyeon was upgraded to an ethnic autonomous prefecture under the new Chinese government with Yeonggil-si, or popularly known as Yanji City, as its administrative seat. Yanji houses the largest number of Koreans as compared to 10 other big cities where the diaspora lives. And as a regional hub of business and tourism since 2000, it has been the host of the annual expo, the Duman River Area International Investment and Business Forum. In the wake of the most stringent sanctions against North Korea, the Duman River area happens to be the lifeline or Hermit Kingdom's main window through which ordinary North Koreans can breathe fresh air and get access to the outer world. The Duman River is narrow and shallow as compared to Amnok River, and its long, polluted, desolate stretches are hardly patrolled by any security personnel. During winters, it is frozen and can be crossed walking, and this makes it an ideal route for all sorts of smuggling, as well as slipping out of the country for North Korean defectors. On the side of China, it has become a major tourist destination, as this is the closest one can get to North Korea without entering the country. That said, the unpatrolled border has also led to a huge drug problem in Jilin province. Now the second element, competing regional interests. The Duman area is what I call a common kitchen for three chefs, that is North Korea, China and Russia. What is cooking among the three neighbors has always been a curious speculation among the pundits of global affairs, since all three seem to have this penchant for the same dish, albeit with different seasoning, and that is a nuclear-powered authoritarian regime with communist ideology. They rub one another's shoulders just a stone's throw away from top economies like Japan, South Korea, and the US in the Pacific. And they flex muscles in the vicinity of a promising trade bloc, ASEAN. But recognizing the prospects for development as a special economic zone, China, Russia, North Korea, joined by Mongolia and South Korea, with the support of United Nations Development Program, signed 3 agreements in 1995 to create the Duman River Area Development Program, which was renamed in 2005 as Greater Duman Initiative, with focus on 5 sectors, namely tourism, transport, energy, environment, and investment. Given the competing interests and constantly evolving landscape of geopolitics, a certain degree of trust deficit is bound to prevail among all parties. Nonetheless, borrowing the notion of impermanence from Buddha and stealing the lines from Yun Dongju, 그러나 겨울이 지나고 나의 별에도 봄이 오면, meaning someday when the atmosphere or circumstances change, this Duman project could have a far more profound impact on the region in terms of shared progress and prosperity. Now with this we come to the last element, that is Peninsula in Pain. The song 눈물젖은 두만강 is nothing but an unflinching reflection of tragedies caused by conflicts in the area, such as the Battle of Lake Khasan in 1938, which was a military incursion by Manchukuo, a Japanese puppet state, into the territory controlled by the Soviet Union. Japan later withdrew after heavy fighting, huge casualties, and diplomatic settlement. Another humanitarian crisis was Hungnam Cholsu Chakchon, or Hungnam evacuation. If you recall the events during the Korean War, in the wake of the defeat of the UN forces during the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir by the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, this evacuation, also known as the Miracle of Christmas, was the safe withdrawal of the UN forces and North Korean civilians between 10th and 24th December 1950 from the port of Hungnam in eastern North Korea. The US forces were taken mainly to Busan port in South Korea. Since the 1945 Okinawa operation, it is believed to be the largest sea lift. In just 2 weeks, over 100,000 military personnel, some 17,500 vehicles, around 350,000 tons of cargo, including even broken down vehicles, and more importantly, some 91,000 refugees were pulled out. But sadly, many more had to be left behind. This operation engaged heavy bombardment from land, air, and sea due to a misplaced or perceived threat that the Chinese troops might interfere with the withdrawal, which they did not. As a consequence, it did add to the miseries of those on the ground. A recent Korean movie, Kukje Sijang, or Ode to My Father, brilliantly captures the good, the bad, and the ugly of this story. Given this magnitude of devastation and sufferings in the region, it is no wonder that the older generation, while recalling yesteryears, tends to get inconsolable, crying the whole Duman River from the corners of their wrinkled eyes. In the next episode, to decode these emotions, we will talk about the genre, sentiment, and the healing power of this classic 눈물젖은 두만강, besides singing Korean as well as Hindi version. See you soon.